August 26, 1959. High noon on the old Tucson lot, but time has stopped. Inside Soundstage 4, the desert heat is trapped, mixing with the scent of hot dust, sweat, and something sharper, fear. The only movement is the slow curl of cigarette smoke from the director's chair and the trembling hand of John Wayne as he raises it to wipe his brow. It's the 47th take, the 47th, of a simple walk across a wooden street that doesn't even exist. Howard Hawks, the architect of American cool, the man who taught Bogart how to hold a cigarette and Grant how to run his mouth, lets the silence stretch until it screams. Then he speaks. His voice isn't loud. It's dry, precise, and it carries the venom of a man dissecting a corpse. For God's sake, Duke, a pause, the crew shrinks. Even my gardener could hit his mark. Another pause, the air leaves the room. Are you an actor or a goddamned lawn ornament? The words don't echo, they implant. You can see the exact moment they reach John Wayne's central nervous system. A flinch so deep it's almost invisible, a paralysis that starts behind his eyes and radiates outward, turning his famous, confident posture into something stiff, something ornamental. He doesn't look at Hawks. He looks at the ground, as if searching for the pieces of his own shattered persona. Then, with a silence more deafening than any tantrum, he turns. He walks past the camera, past the horrified script girl with her hand over her mouth, out the heavy soundstage doors, and into the obliterating Arizona sun. He just walks away. And in the wreckage he leaves behind, Howard Hawks allows himself a small, tight smile. He's won. He's broken the unbreakable man. But he's made a fatal miscalculation. He's forgotten about the witness. From the deep shadows near the false front saloon, a figure stirs. Dean Martin, who has been leaning there for 47 takes, perfectly still, removes his sunglasses. The easygoing grin is gone. In its place is a calm, cold, analytical focus. He's not watching a director work. He's watching a predator make its kill. And what he does next isn't in the script. It's an intervention. A quiet, devastating coup that will rewrite the power structure on that set and haunt Hollywood's old guard for decades. This is the story they tried to bury. Not about a movie, but about a murder of a friendship. And the confession, decades later, that finally revealed why Dean Martin, the man everyone underestimated, was the only one brave enough to speak. To understand the atomic weight of that insult, you must first feel the world it destroyed. Rewind the film. The year is 1958. Hollywood is in its late, lavish afternoon, gilded but terrified. Television's ghostly blue glow is seeping under every studio gate. The old gods feel their immortality slipping. Howard Hawks' response is not to adapt, but to double down. To build a fortress of classicism so perfect, so immaculate, it would stand as a permanent rebuke to the changing world. That fortress is Rio Bravo *. It is born from a pure personal hatred for *High Noon*, a film Hawks saw as a cowardly, un-American betrayal. He would make the opposite, a film about professionals, about men who stand together because it's their job, their code, their religion. The ultimate film about loyalty. The tragedy is that by the end of the shoot, the concept would become a sick joke, a mirror held up to its own broken promise. He summoned his general first, John Wayne, the Duke. Their relationship was the bedrock of post-war Hollywood masculinity. It wasn't just director and star, it was sculptor and masterpiece, father and prodigal son who never left. They had made *Red River*, a film where Hawks famously pushed Wayne to a real, trembling fury to get the performance he wanted. That push became their language, their bond, a brutal, respectful alchemy. To play the fallen deputy Jude, Hawks made a left-field choice that stunned the money men, Dean Martin, the nightclub crooner, Jerry Lewis's other half, a man the studio saw as a risky, liquored-up joke. But Hawks saw something else, a raw, authentic ruin behind the eyes, a lived-in weariness that couldn't be acted. He also saw a social specimen he fundamentally disdained. Dean was of the Vegas night, of whispered introductions and handshake deals. He was *connected in ways the aristocratic, Yale-educated Hawks found vaguely grotesque. The stage was set, the patrician director, the noble cowboy star, and the cheeky, dangerous interloper from the wrong side of the tracks. They descended on old Tucson, and for a brief, shining moment, it was a paradise, a pure, masculine dream. The dailies from those first weeks were magical. Wayne was a force of nature, his sheer physical presence bending the light around him. And Dean was a quiet revolution. Hawks would watch, baffled, as Martin shuffled through rehearsals, mumbling lines, seemingly disengaged. Then the camera would roll, and something electric would happen. A flicker of profound shame in Jude's eyes as he reaches for a discarded cigarillo. A line delivered with such worn-out, self-loathing humor it would break your heart. He was doing something Hawks couldn't teach. He was being, not performing. It was alchemy, and it unnerved the master craftsman. Because Dean's genius was effortless, and in Hollywood, effort was the currency of respect. The social chemistry was even more volatile. After Cut was called, the real power shifted. Wayne's giant trailer became the set's true command post, and Dean was its king. He held court, spinning tales of the Copacabana and the Chicago mob, of Sinatra's tempers and lawmen who were less noble than the ones Wayne played. Wayne, the ultimate American fiction, was mesmerized by the man who lived in its American reality. Their laughter, a deep, rumbling, genuine sound, would roll out across the lot. Hawks, who expected to be the sun around which all planets orbited, often found himself on the outside, a solitary figure sipping a drink in the deepening twilight. The exclusion was subtle, but it was absolute, and for a man like Hawks, a man who controlled every frame of reality he created, it was an intolerable rebellion. The first cracks in the foundation weren't in the script, they were in the silence between the laughs. Hawks' retaliation was psychological, a masterclass in corrosive authority. He began to dismantle John Wayne piece by piece in front of the family they had built. It was never a shout, it was the quiet drip of acid. During a crucial monologue, he'd interrupt. "Stop, you're selling it, Duke, just say it. Or can't you tell the difference anymore?" In a scene requiring quiet intensity, he'd sigh, "You look like you're waiting for a bus. Is there a bus coming, Duke? Should we call for a schedule?" Each comment was a surgical strike at Wayne's confidence, designed to make the instinctual actor think, to pull the natural phenomenon down to the level of mere technique. The crew watched in a kind of horrified fascination. They were witnessing a deconstruction. The Wayne they knew, the sure-footed, morally certain presence, began to waver. He'd hesitate before an action. He'd question a blocking choice he'd have nailed instinctively a week before. The myth was becoming a man, and the process was unbearably cruel. And always, Hawks would use Dean as the reluctant foil. After flaying Wayne with a critique, he'd turn, a thin, humorless smile on his lips. "You see, Dinah, less is more, try for less." It was a double-edged insult, a reminder to Wayne that he was overdoing it, and a patronizing pat on the head for Dean, the simpleton who just had to be natural. But Dean, from his post in the shadows, wasn't buying the act. He was a student of human weakness, a connoisseur of power plays. He saw Hawks not as a genius directing, but as a king terrified of a coup, lashing out at his heir apparent. The tension built to a hum in the air, a frequency of dread that vibrated in the teeth. Then came the walk. It was nothing, a transition. Chance walks from the jail to the saloon, establishing beat. It became the entire war. Take 10, take 20, take 35. You're lumbering. Now you're mincing. Good God, man, just put one foot in front of the other. With each failure, Wayne's body betrayed him more. This man who could cross a prairie with the grace of a wolf now moved like a marionette with tangled strings. The desert sun, pouring through the high studio windows, felt like a spotlight on an execution. The crew's empathy was a physical weight in the room. They wanted to look away. They couldn't. And Hawks, his eyes cold behind his glasses, was relentless. He was no longer directing a performance. He was conducting an autopsy on a friendship. He was proving that his creation owed him everything, even its dignity. On take 47, as Wayne finished the walk with the stiff, hopeless resignation of a man heading to the gallows, Hawks delivered the line that crossed from cruelty into obliteration, the lawn ornament. The words hung in the air not as criticism, but as a final verdict. They defined Wayne not as a living legend, but as a static, useless decoration. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The light in Wayne's eyes didn't just dim, it went out. He was a shell. And then the silent, devastating retreat. The walk into the desert wasn't an exit, it was a disappearance. Hawks sat back. He'd done it, he had exerted total control. In the vacuum of that terrible victory, he finally registered the silence. It was the wrong kind of silence. It wasn't respectful fear, it was witnessing, and then movement. From the shadows, Dean Martin emerged. He didn't storm, he didn't hurry. He moved with a lethal, quiet purpose that commanded the room more than any shout. He walked past the gaffers, past the sound man with his head in his hands, straight into the center of the set, onto the sacred ground Hawks ruled. He stopped on Wayne's mark. He turned. He looked directly at Howard Hawks. and when he spoke, his voice was a low, calm instrument, stripped of all song, all showmanship. It was the voice of a negotiator in a locked room. "You happy now, Howard?" Hawks blinked, thrown by the directness, by the use of his first name in this context. "I want a good film, Dean, that's all." "Do you?" Dean asked, taking a single step forward. The step was an invasion, because from here it looks like you wanted a corpse. You just shot your own horse in front of the whole town. Now how you gonna get to the end of the picture? Hawks' face tightened. "You're not the director here." "No," Dean agreed, his head tilting slightly. "I'm the audience, and I'm bored, and I'm disgusted." He let that hang, his blue eyes locked on Hawks. "See, I've been around guys like you, guys who need to see a strong man bleed to feel tall themselves. Back where I'm from, we have a word for that." He didn't say the word. He didn't need to. "You think you're making art? You're just throwing a tantrum because your favorite toy has other friends." He moved closer still, now within arm's reach of the seated director. He lowered his voice further, but in the crystalline silence, every syllable was a bullet. "Let me tell you what you really did. You didn't break John Wayne the actor. Any hack can rattle an actor. You broke John Wayne the man, your friend, the guy who's had your back for 30 years. You did it in front of 50 people who worship him. And for what? Because he laughed at a joke I told. Because he doesn't look at you like God anymore." Dean's gaze was pitiless. "He's out there right now, wondering if everything he's ever done is a joke, and you're sitting here smoking, thinking you won the scene." He took a final, sweeping look around the grand, artificial town. "This is all a set, Howard. None of it's real. The only real thing out here just walked into the desert because you forgot he was real. You're the director. Go direct your star back. Or admit your movie. Over." With that, he slid his sunglasses on, a definitive period to his speech. He turned his back on Howard Hawks, an act of unimaginable defiance, and walked with that same infuriating, unflappable stride out the door, following the path of the broken giant. He left behind not just silence, but a new reality. The spell was broken. The emperor had been told he was naked by the court jester, and the jester had just revealed he was the smartest man in the room. What happened in the desert is the heart of the secret. Dean found Wayne not far out, sitting on a rock, a monument in a wasteland. He didn't offer platitudes, he sat. He lit 2 cigarettes past 1. The silence was companionable, a shared space of defeat. Minutes passed. The sun baked the rocks. Finally, Wayne spoke, his voice raw. "Maybe he's right. Maybe I'm just a thing they point a camera at." Dean exhaled a long stream of smoke, watching it dissipate in the heat. "Nah, Duke. Things don't get their feelings hurt. You're a man, he's a director. He needs to feel like he's pulling the strings even when the puppets walk in away. He's scared." "Scared of what?" Wayne asked, the confusion genuine. Dean looked at him, a sad, knowing smile touching his lips. "Of you, of me, of time. Of the fact that he's not the young genius anymore and you're not his discovery. You're John Wayne, and I'm Dean Martin, and we don't need him half as much as he needs us to need him." It was a brutal, elegant analysis of the entire Hollywood ecosystem. It was the truth, and it was the only medicine that could work. The walk back was a procession, 2 kings returning to a kingdom that had just witnessed the attempted regicide. The crew saw them, and a wave of something like hope moved through them. Hawks, standing in the doorway, saw them too. He saw the way they walked, side by side. He saw the unspoken solidarity. And in that moment, Howard Hawks, for perhaps the first time in his professional life, surrendered. He didn't apologize. He simply nodded, a small, tight gesture. "Let's try it again, from the top." The war was over. A cold peace had been declared. The rest of Rio Bravo was filmed under that peace. A tense, professional, ice-cold armistice. The performances you see are spectacular, some of the most nuanced of their careers, but they are fueled by a complex cocktail of pride, hurt, and a desperate professionalism. The legendary camaraderie on screen is the performance of a lifetime, because off-screen, the friendship that had launched 1,000 dreams was dead. John Wayne and Howard Hawks never spoke beyond what was professionally necessary ever again. They completed their masterpiece as strangers. The film was released to acclaim, a celebrated ode to loyalty. The irony was almost too dark to bear. In the years that followed, Wayne built his own empire, John Wayne Productions, ensuring he would never again be subject to the whims of a single director's ego. His persona grew larger, more insulated, a fortress around the wounded man. Hawks' work continued, but the magic of that central, trusted partnership was gone. He never again found a muse he didn't ultimately try to break. And Dean Martin, he collected his paycheck, went back to the sands, and never spoke publicly about what happened. But he changed. The experience confirmed his darkest, most fundamental belief about the world, that authority was often just bullying, that genius was often just ego, and that the only real power was the power to walk away. He perfected his act of serene detachment. The glass in his hand on stage wasn't just a prop, it was a moat. He had looked into the abyss of Hollywood's creation myth and hadn't blinked. He had seen the great Howard Hawks revealed as a small, scared man, and the great John Wayne revealed as a vulnerable one. And knowing that, he could never take any of it, the fame, the drama, the legend, entirely seriously again. He became the most free man in Hollywood because he was the only one who knew it was all a beautifully shot con. The story was suppressed for decades. Hawks' Circle dismissed it as Dino causing trouble on set. Wayne's people, protective of the Duke's invincible image, wanted no record of his vulnerability. It was reduced to a footnote, creative differences. But whispers persisted. A grip would tell a bartender. A script girl would confide in a film student. The legend grew in the dark because it contained a terrifying truth, that the system that built these gods was brutal, fragile, and manned by flawed, jealous men. It revealed that the ultimate act of heroism on that set wasn't performed by the cowboy with the gun, but by the crooner with the quiet voice and the courage to say, "No more." Hollywood buries stories like this because they are origin stories for a different, uglier mythology. They prove that our icons are human, that our geniuses can be monsters, and that sometimes salvation comes not from the hero in the white hat, but from the seemingly indifferent observer in the shadows who simply decides, "This ends now." They buried it deep, but the desert preserves everything. And sometimes, if you listen closely to the wind through the canyon where they filmed a masterpiece, you can still hear it. The echo of a shattering insult, the crunch of boots walking away, and the calm, devastating voice that spoke truth to power and changed everything. This is Hollywood Untold Files. We listen to those echoes. We sift that desert sand. If you believe the real stories are worth the excavation, worth the uncomfortable truth they reveal, then you're already with us. Subscribe. Stay. The desert is vast, and the bones of the old gods have stories yet to tell. The early dailies were electric. You could feel it in the screening room, the crackle of something timeless being born. Wayne was a rock, his gravity holding the film's universe together. And Dean was a revelation. Hawks would watch, grudgingly impressed, as Martin would mumble through a rehearsal, seemingly disinterested, only to ignite the moment the camera rolled. He would deliver a line with a heartbreaking fragility, or land a joke with the precision of a diamond cutter, all while looking like he'd just rolled out of bed. It was genius, but it was an intuitive, chaotic genius that Hawks, the ultimate controller, could not comprehend. It infuriated him. Because Dean's ease exposed the machinery of everyone else's effort, it made the work look like work. And then the social dynamics began to shift. After hours, the real set emerged. In Wayne's massive trailer, a rolling palace of leather and bourbon, a new inner circle formed. Dean was the star. His stories of the Copacabana, of Sinatra, of backroom deals in Cleveland, held Wayne spellbound. Wayne, the ultimate American icon, was fascinated by the man who navigated the real American underworld. Their laughter would echo across the lot, deep, genuine roars of camaraderie. Hawks, who expected to be the center of every orbit, would often be left outside that circle, nursing a drink alone by the cooling cameras. The patriarch was being gently, but firmly, excluded. The first seeds of resentment were sown in that fertile soil of loneliness and bruised ego. The psychological warfare began subtly. A director's tool turned into a weapon. Hawks started with Wayne. It was never a blunt instrument, it was 1,000 paper cuts. He'd interrupt a powerful take not with a critique of the performance, but of the man. "You're leaning, Duke. Only insecure men lean." Or during a tense standoff scene, he'd call cut and say, too loudly, "Remember, he's afraid of you. Try to look less friendly." Each comment was designed to dismantle Wayne's instinct, to make him self-conscious, to pull the legend off his pedestal and reduce him to an actor following orders. He was resculpting his own masterpiece, and the process was violent. Wayne, whose entire being was built on a foundation of natural, unthinking authority, began to falter. He'd second-guess a cross. He'd hesitate before a line reading. The crew saw it, a collective wince with every flinch from the Duke. And Hawks would then turn, his gaze landing on Dean, who was always watching, always quiet. "See, Dinah, simplicity, don't overthink it." The condescension was a blade meant for both men, to shame Wayne and to put Dean in his perceived place, the student, the lightweight. But Dean just absorbed it, his expression unreadable behind his ever-present sunglasses. He was studying. He was learning the topography of this quiet war, and he was understanding that this wasn't about art anymore. This was about dominion. The tension built like pressure before a quake. The desert heat seemed to amplify every silent grievance. Then came the scene, the simple, cursed walk. Sheriff John T. Chance had to cross from the jail to the saloon. A 30-second shot, a nothing. It became the everything. Take after take, Hawk's voice would slice through the silence. Stomp, shuffle. You look lost, Duke, are you lost? With each failed attempt, Wayne's physical presence, that magnificent, confident architecture, seemed to crumble from the inside. He was a giant becoming a ghost. The crew stopped watching the performance. They watched the erosion of a monument. The air grew thick with a collective empathy, a desperate wish for just one good take to end the torture. It wouldn't come. Hawks was in the grip of something darker than perfectionism. This was an exorcism. He was trying to purge the independent spirit he'd helped create, to prove that without his guiding hand, the legend was just a man. And then, on the 47th attempt, as Wayne finished the walk with the weary stiffness of a condemned man, Hawks delivered the coup de grace, the lawn ornament line. It wasn't just an insult to the actor, it was a negation of the icon, the career, the very man. It reduced 50 years of myth-making to a decorative, inanimate object. The result was the silent, catastrophic exit, the walking away. In that moment, Hawks won his brutal little battle, but in winning, he activated a force he had never calculated on. A force currently pushing itself off a prop wall, its easy smile gone, replaced by a calm, terrifying focus. From the deep shadows, Dean Martin moved. He didn't rush. His movement was fluid, deliberate, a panther uncoiling. He walked past the frozen crew, his boot heels clicking a soft, rhythmic counterpoint to the pounding silence. He didn't go to the door. He walked directly into the heart of the set, stopping on the exact chalk mark Wayne had just vacated. He turned to face Howard Hawks. The director, still in his chair, met his gaze, a flicker of annoyance replacing his shock. This was an interruption, an intrusion from the clown. Dean removed his sunglasses. His eyes were clear blue and utterly without warmth. "Well, Howard," he began, his voice a low, conversational murmur that somehow carried to every corner of the soundstage. "You finally got what you wanted." Hawks bristled. "I want a performance, Dino, not a parade." Dean nodded slowly, as if considering this. He took a single, meaningful step closer, invading the director's personal space. "You got a performance, all right. A performance of you being the biggest son of a bitch on this lot." A collective, silent gasp swept through the crew. No one spoke to Hawks like that. No one. Hawks' face flushed. "You're out of line." "Am I?" Dean asked, his head tilting. "See, I've been watching. I watch a lot. It's a habit from my old line of work. You're not directing him, you're gutting him, and you're doing it in front of the people who respect him most. You think that makes you powerful." He let the question hang, his eyes scanning Hawks' face, reading every micro-twitch of anger and pride. "It makes you small, Howard. It makes you a bully on a playground. And this," he gestured around the grand, fake Western street, "this is the most expensive playground in the world." He leaned in closer now, his voice dropping to a near whisper, a confidential tone that made every crew member strain to hear. This was the kill shot. "You know what your real problem is? You think you own these men. You think you created John Wayne. You didn't. The world created him. You just pointed a camera at him. And now you're trying to break him because he dares to have a life, a friend, a thought outside of your little movie." He paused, letting the accusation sink into the void left by Wayne's absence. "You broke your star, you broke your friend, you broke the motor of your own movie. And for what? To prove you could." Dean took a final, slow look around, his gaze taking in the lights, the cameras, the waiting, humiliated crew. "He's the engine, Howard. You're just the guy with the map. And right now, your engine is walking into the desert. Good luck getting this wagon train to the river without him." With that, he slid his sunglasses back on, a curtain falling on the scene. He didn't wait for a reply. He turned and walked, with that same infuriatingly calm stride, off the set and out into the blinding light, following the path of the man he'd just defended. He left behind a vacuum, a silence so complete it had a sound of its own, a high-pitched ring of shattered authority. The aftermath on the set was a study in collapse. Hawks sat back in his chair, the cigarette in his hand now shaking visibly. The triumph he'd felt moments before had curdled into something acrid and fearful. He had been seen, truly seen, and the person who saw him was the one man he'd considered beneath his notice. The crew, liberated by Dean's act of defiance, began to move, not at Hawke's command, but on their own initiative. Cinematographer quietly ordered the lights to be powered down. The first AD announced an indefinite break. The fortress of Rio Bravo was breached, not from the outside, but from within its most overlooked chamber. Meanwhile, in the desert, a different scene was unfolding. Dean found Wayne not far from the set, sitting on a flat, sun-bleached rock, staring at the vast, indifferent horizon. He didn't approach like a savior. He sat down a few feet away, respecting the space of a wounded animal. He lit 2 cigarettes, passed one over, no words. For 10 full minutes they smoked in a silence that was more therapeutic than any speech. Finally, Wayne spoke, his voice gravelly with emotion he was fighting to contain. "He's right, you know. Maybe I'm just a thing they point cameras at." Dean took a long drag, exhaling the smoke toward the infinite blue sky. "Nah, Duke, things don't hurt. You're hurtin'." He needed to see that. Makes him feel like he's doing something important. He's not directing a movie right now. He's directing his own biography, and you weren't following the script. It was the only analysis. The only comfort John Wayne would receive. It was enough. The return was mythic. 2 silhouettes, backlit by the dying sun, walking side by side out of the wilderness. The crew saw them first, and a wave of palpable relief, even reverence, washed through the lot. Hawks, watching from the darkness of the soundstage door, saw them too. The message was unmistakable. A new alliance had been forged in the desert. When Wayne stepped back onto the set, he didn't look at Hawks. He walked to his mark. He looked at the camera, and he was John Wayne again. Not the broken man from before, but a man who had chosen to return. The choice was his. That was the unspoken victory. Hawks, ever the pragmatist, ever the coward when his authority was truly challenged, simply nodded. All right, places. No apology, no acknowledgement, just the resumption of work. But everything had changed. The remaining shoot was a masterpiece of professional ice. The performances are what you see on screen, some of the best of their careers, but they were fueled not by warm camaraderie, but by a complex, bitter energy. Every glance between Chance and Jude in the film is now layered with the real-world knowledge. We survived him, together. The legacy of that afternoon is a ghost that haunts the halls of cinema history. Rio Bravo was hailed as a classic, a perfect film about loyalty, the greatest lie Hollywood ever told on celluloid. John Wayne and Howard Hawks never made another picture together. The friendship was a casualty of that desert war, buried in an unmarked grave. They became polite strangers, the bond reduced to a line in a history book. Wayne's later work grew more insulated, more self-referential, as if he'd built a fortress of his own after his trust was betrayed. Hawks' later films lacked that certain central gravity. He never found another cornerstone he hadn't felt compelled to break. And Dean Martin, he played the rest of the shoot perfectly in character, the easygoing Jude, but those close to him knew he had crossed a line from which there was no return. He had looked into the dark heart of the machine that creates legends and saw the petty, fragile men at the controls. He would continue to smile, to pour drinks on stage, to play the fool, but the knowledge gave him a profound, unshakable distance. He had won a battle no one else dared to fight, and the prize was the lonely understanding of how the game was truly played. He became the quietest, and perhaps the most powerful, man in the room. Hollywood buried this story because it is the story of its own creation myth unraveling. It proves that the icons are human, the geniuses are cruel, and the strongest man in the fight is sometimes the one who speaks the quiet, devastating truth. They buried it, but Grave in the desert have a way of giving up their secrets. This is Hollywood Untold Files. We are the diggers. If you believe the real stories are worth the dust on your hands, then stay with us. Subscribe. Because the desert is vast, and the bones are still out there, waiting for someone to finally give them a voice.